have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm the very humid Ann Northrup. My hair's collapsed, my
Lots.
clothes.
And with us is James Essex, who we'll be talking to shortly from the ACLU.
But not shortly talking to him. Because the big news this week is that the ACLU is not letting any grass grow under their feet. They are bringing suits for marriage in Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Virginia. And we're going to talk to him about all of that.
And a breakthrough in the Congress. For the first time, a U.S. Senate committee has passed a transgender inclusive Employment Non-Discrimination Act with all the Democrats voting aye, right?
Yeah.
And 3 key Republicans getting on board.
Pretty much. While the ACLU is filing those marriage cases, Freedom to Marry says it will take about $100 million to get America up to 60% support for same-sex marriage by 2016, which is what they think it'll take to get a full decision from the Supreme Court in support of marriage nationwide.
ExxonMobil is being investigated in Illinois for anti-gay discrimination.
Dynasty Young, who you may remember, will remind you, has won a settlement from the Indianapolis schools where he was harassed for being gay and gender nonconforming.
Gay geeks have launched a campaign against a new movie based on writing by homophobe Orson Scott Card. We'll tell you about that.
The National Endowment for the Arts medals and the humanities presented by the president include several out gay and lesbian recipients.
We're going to have the latest anti-gay pronouncements from the last 2 popes, Robert Mugabe and the son of Antonin Scalia.
I don't know about that last one.
You don't?
No.
Okay.
You'll fill me in. There was another brutal anti-gay attack in Chile.
Costa Rica may have allowed same-sex marriage by mistake.
I think it's only civil unions, but
Yeah, well,
whatever.
right, it's true.
Andy's going to review a new play called Choir Boy, a gay-themed play about African Americans at a prep school.
And by now you've probably seen Steve Grand's gay-themed online music video, All American Boy. It's been taken off.
But we are very, very happy to welcome our occasional and very favorite guest, James Essex, who joins us this week. James is the head of the ACLU's Lesbian and Gay Rights LGBT Rights Project and was one of the main lawyers for Edie Windsor in the DOMA case at the Supreme Court. So we have a ton of stuff to talk to you about.
Great.
But I sort of want to pick up where we left off last time, because the last time you were here, the Supreme Court had just agreed to take the case. And we asked you how you felt, and you said thrilled and terrified.
And indeed I was, both thrilled and terrified. And so, so that was back in December.
Yep.
And we went through a long process of briefing, arguing at the end of March, and then obviously a decision just a couple of weeks ago. And it
Congratulations.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
I saw in the Times that you won.
Indeed, we won.
And I want to say to you, thank you.
Yes.
Well, thank you.
Because you
Thank
all
very
did a
much.
fantastic job, and as I told you as we were preparing to roll cameras here, I get emotional just looking at you now, and I'm usually very blasé about all this, but whenever I really focus on it, it makes me emotional.
Well, thank you for that. We had a fabulous team. Robbie Kaplan and Paul Weiss, the Stanford Law School Supreme Court Litigation Clinic, and all the people from the ACLU and the NYCLU. But obviously, all of this is really due to Edie Windsor. She's lived an amazing life and had incredible courage to stand up to what was clearly wrong and felt wrong, but it's not everybody who says, okay, I'm going to go do something
Well,
about
let
it.
me ask you about that, because she said when this decision came down and she was being interviewed and giving news conferences that the major LGBT groups were not supportive of her bringing this case in the first place.
And I just want to slip in that I ran into Brendan Fay when you were having your press conference there, and she called him up in 2007, I think it was, and said, I heard you're the guy who gets people married, and took her to, and Thea to Canada to do that. So she didn't start out in this really connected to the activist community.
No, and in fact, so Thea dies in '09, and Edie has to deal with the estate tax problem as well as just the grief of losing someone that she'd been with for 44 years. And she makes her way to Robbie Kaplan, who she heard about because Robbie had done a right to marry lawsuit in the New York State High Court with the ACLU and the NYCLU. And I think that's how Edie got there. And then Robbie called us up and said, hey, would you help us with this? And we said, of course.
Had others turned her down?
You know, I don't know the details of that. I do know this, that there were many of us in the LGBT advocacy community who were worried about whether challenging the Defense of Marriage Act made sense. And, you know, that discussion was going on right from 2003
Yes.
When the Goodridge decision, when GLAAD won the Goodridge decision in Massachusetts. And as soon as marriage became a reality for same-sex couples in Massachusetts in the spring of 2004, all of those couples started to experience, for the first time anywhere in the country, the harm of DOMA. And they wanted to sue from then on.
Which had been passed in 1996 by the Congress,
Exactly.
before marriage was actually legal anywhere.
Indeed, indeed. And so from 2004 onward, there was a conversation among, you know, married same-sex couples and advocates about, well, we know we want to sue about DOMA because we knew we have to do something, and we're probably not going to get it repealed in the Congress. So, you know, when should we file? What are the claims? Can we win? And, you know, as the movement has gotten stronger and as we've won more marriage states, I think that the sense of what's possible in the courts has absolutely changed and evolved. And it may well be that some people thought that it didn't make sense to file a DOMA case when Edie first was asking around. Actually, at the time, shortly after Thea died in early 2009, is when GLAAD filed their first DOMA challenge in Boston. In a case that where they won in the trial court and they won in the appeals
Is that
court.
the Gill case?
The Gill case, exactly.
And when you say GLAAD, just so we're clear, it's Gay and Lesbian Advocates and Defenders, the legal group in Boston, not GLAAD, the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation.
Indeed, indeed. So, you know, so Edie, I mean, I really do feel like Edie is responsible for pushing us forward and for having a story that connected with so much of America.
Unbelievable.
I mean, yeah, it is amazing, but it is an amazing story.
So how did it feel to be in the Supreme Court making the arguments? And what was the emotion or the prediction in the team as all this went forward?
Sure. Well, for me, this was the case of a lifetime, no question. It was great to be in the courtroom, to watch Robbie Kaplan argue the case, for us to have worked on the briefs with this wonderful team. And sitting in the Supreme Court at counsel table, I, you know, had a little bit of an out-of-body experience. I mean, I was both there focused intently on the questions that the justices were asking, because that's the only way you can have any sense of where they're going and what they're concerned about, and furiously taking notes about it, but also sitting there thinking, here I am, sitting at counsel table in this really cool case. And what they do is going to make such a difference for so many people's lives. And that was heady and exciting and kind of terrifying in its own way.
And were you there for the Prop 8 case as well?
I was there the day before to listen to the arguments in the Prop 8 case.
And this was one that the major national LGBT groups, you know, advised against, and ultimately ended with sort of a non-decision with a lack of standing, but people are able to get married in California again. Everybody talks about the fact that it certainly did a lot of good in terms of, you know, setting a trial record and all that kind of stuff, but how are you feeling about that case now?
Well, it got us to a wonderful place. It restored the freedom to marry to California, and that's a huge advance for the country and for the movement. You know, the reason that we and other people were concerned and worried, and sometimes terrified, about the Prop 8 case is that if we weren't sure whether the Supreme Court was going to be ready to get to the merits of that case. And when people filed the case, it wasn't at all clear that there was going to be a reason that the Supreme Court could not get to the merits, that there would be a standing problem, that the state of California would lose the case and then not appeal. That no one thought that far ahead, because that wasn't the world we lived in 2009. We had just come off of 4 years of fighting the state of California in the California marriage cases that the ACLU, National Center for Lesbian Rights, and Lambda Legal jointly litigated. And the state of California fought us all the way to the California Supreme Court. So nobody thought at that point that California was going to switch sides.
No less Arnold Schwarzenegger. And
Indeed.
then, of course, Jerry Brown and Kamala.
Well, the Justice Department switched sides in your case, too.
And they did.
Unprecedented, according to, was it Justice Roberts?
Well, so they did what they were supposed to do, which is the Justice Department, in the normal course of things, has an absolute obligation to defend the constitutionality of the laws that the Congress passes. But it's also quite clear that when there's no reasonable argument for the constitutionality of a statute, they can and should decline to defend. And they've done it in many other contexts, and they did it here. And despite the fact that they got a lot of guff from some of the justices, they did the right thing. And it was a courageous thing for the Obama Justice Department to do, to switch sides and tell the court what they really thought the Constitution required.
Although it almost undermined standing in your case, too.
Yeah, but it did create that issue, that question about was there enough of a fight here between E.D. Windsor and the United States to present the legal questions to the court about the constitutionality of DOMA. Thankfully, the court adhered to its prior precedent that actually was pretty clear on this and said, yes, there was jurisdiction. And that's actually going to be very helpful. That part of the Windsor decision is going to be helpful as we go forward in other states.
So you get this great decision from Justice Kennedy in the DOMA case. And why couldn't all that be applied, to the Prop 8 case, other than the fact that they just didn't want to address the standing issue?
Yes. So, So I think that why couldn't it be applied to Prop 8 itself,
and say
or to the
everybody should have this right, not just federal rights?
I've been interested in the number of people who have said to me that they thought the Supreme Court chickened out by not using the Prop 8 case to declare a national right to marriage.
Well, look, I think they got to the right answer on the standing question in Prop 8. I actually think that when the state of California decided not to appeal, that's a decision that the executive gets to make. That's what those people are elected to do.
Part of me thinks the whole reason the Supreme Court took that case was to decide standing issues, which were ambiguous in previous decisions.
Yes, and look, big picture on standing, the conservative justices on the U.S. Supreme Court have spent decades restricting standing law and making it harder and harder for people to get into court. Big picture for people with civil rights claims, that is never a good thing. It would have been really kind of amazing to see those justices back away from existing conservative standing doctrine just to get to the merits of this case.
Okay. So we get, again, a great civil rights decision in the DOMA case, of course, right after some really terrible decisions on voting rights and things.
Indeed.
So it's not really I wouldn't call it a liberal court.
It's not a liberal court, but they have been good to the gays, right?
Yeah.
And that's. But look, part of that may well simply be that we are farther behind in the civil rights journey. We are still trying to get rid of explicit de jure discrimination in federal statutes against gay people and in state statutes against gay people. We thankfully don't live in that world in terms of race discrimination and sex discrimination anymore. We're in the much more difficult phase of those movements where we're trying to take the formal legal equality that's on the books and turn it into a reality of equality in people's everyday lived lives. And we're doing some of that work on the LGBT movement now, and we have to do more of it. That's in the future for us, and that's a harder part of a movement.
Was there, you're sitting there, you're listening to the questions in the court, and then you get the decision and read the dissents and the majority opinions. Was there ever a time when you thought you might get more of the justices to vote on your side?
Well, before the arguments, I was at least hopeful that Chief Justice Roberts might go with us. Perhaps on a federalism theory, a theory that our theory was an equality theory. Well, why are you treating the marriages of gay people differently from the marriages of straight people? The other way to look at it was to say, what in the world is the federal government doing, deciding who's married or not? The states do that in our federal system, and the rule had always been that if you're married under state law, you're married for federal purposes. And why did they change it? I thought that Roberts might well go with us on federalism. From the oral argument, it was quite clear that Roberts was working very hard, both in his questioning of the Solicitor General and his questioning of Robbie Kaplan, Edie's lawyer. He was trying to undermine the strength of the federalism argument. Justice Kennedy was asking questions about federalism, and Roberts was trying to get the advocates in front of the court to tell Justice Kennedy that they didn't agree with his theory. So it was pretty clear to me at that point that we did not have Roberts' vote.
I think he's given too much credit for trying to
For the healthcare?
Yes, because he in that decision really undermine the Commerce Clause and
He did
in
some,
his
yes.
decision. Yes.
Well, and let's talk about the intricacies of the decisions, or the dissents and the decision. What did we all get, even beyond marriage, in terms of the way they talked about gay people and our rights?
Look, I think that the majority opinion in Windsor talks about gay people with enormous respect and enormous understanding of our relationships, recognizes that our marriages are real marriages and that they serve the same function in our lives that they serve in straight people's lives. And I also thought that there was an incredible focus on the harms that DOMA inflicted on married gay people and on their kids and their families. And that, just to read an opinion from the U.S. Supreme Court from a man like Justice Kennedy, who is not a lefty guy at all and an older man, to have him and the rest of the court that signed on understand us and our lives and treat us with that kind of dignity and respect, that's new for us, and that's a big deal. And I think that bodes well for future LGBT rights cases.
Well, don't forget, he was from San Francisco, and when he was first appointed, what we heard was that he used to have his gay neighbors over for barbecues.
Yes.
And now he's written all the three opinions.
And 2 weeks ago, we had Larry Levine on
Yes.
the show, who teaches, with him, and was invited into the court, with him, a gay professor who teaches sexual orientation law out there at the Pacific.
The
McGeorge
McGeorge
School.
School of
McGeorge.
Law.
Yeah.
All right, well, should we move on to the...
Well, I want you to sort of repeat, because it was so good. At the press conference, you talked about what was accomplished in terms of federal law here for LGBT people.
Sure. Well, so two things. One is just in terms of what DOMA does and what it no longer does. DOMA said that the federal government had to treat married same-sex couples as though they're unmarried. And that had consequences for Social Security survivor benefits, for access to health care, for the ability to sponsor a spouse, foreign national spouse for a green card, for veterans benefits, and the list goes on and on and on. And they're all, and the practical impact of this decision on people's daily lives is amazing. And I have a deeper appreciation for that now, post-decision, than I did even beforehand in writing the briefs, because there are so many different people who have spoken up on Facebook and on web pages and stuff, just talking about what it's meant to them. I found it incredibly moving. The other thing that we've done, just sort of movement-wise, is that it used to be that there were many federal laws that explicitly discriminated against gay people. There was, a law saying that the federal government couldn't hire a gay person, that a law that any company that did business with the federal government as a federal contractor couldn't hire gay people. Gay people were excluded from entering the country until 1991. And of course, until 2010, LGBT people couldn't serve openly in the U.S. military.
And our sexual relations could be criminalized.
Yes, indeed. And so we used to have a lot of these laws, and DOMA is the last one at the federal level. And the core of DOMA is Section 3 that we got rid of. Section 2 still says that there's a different rule in terms of how the full faith and credit clause operates. But to get rid of the core of the last law means, we're making a lot of progress in terms of getting rid of the de jure, that is official, written into the law discrimination, different rules for gay people than for straight people. And that doesn't mean we're at the end of the game. There's still a whole lot of discrimination at the state level. But it means we're making a lot of progress, and I think that this is the kind of thing that snowballs. And
do we have to pay attention to what the dissent said, other than, of course, Scalia's prediction that marriage will be
They are a fun read. You're right. So it's Justice Scalia in dissent. In a typical Justice Scalia opinion, he's a very smart guy. He's a very good writer, and he just goes on and on about, don't believe what they say. This isn't just about the Defense of Marriage Act. This is really about marriage in the states. Are we going to take the Windsor majority and use it for marriage in the states? Of course we are.
Yes, we'll get to that. Did you have a big party? How did people feel? How did the team feel when you won?
Fabulous. We were actually on a conference call because there were people, different parts of the country that had worked on the case, and we're all sitting there watching SCOTUS blog just like everybody else because we didn't get any advance information, and the hooting and the hollering that went up, from on the call from all over the country was really, really amazing.
It's giving me chills to think about it. All right, well, let's jump quickly to the future now.
Sure.
You have already now, just a couple of weeks after this decision, filed suit in Pennsylvania, of all places, for marriage, and you're moving it. You've expanded a suit you had going in North Carolina, and you are planning to file it in Virginia. What's going on here, and how does this really relate to the DOMA decision or the Prop 8 decisions, or what is all this?
It builds on the DOMA decision, as we just talked about, on the reasoning of the DOMA decision. But let's sort of back up for a second. So obviously, what's our goal here? Our goal is to get the freedom to marry for same-sex couples who want to get married in every state in the country. And now we're at 13 states plus D.C., and we've got to get the rest of the 37. Okay. It's clear to me that we're going to be back in the U.S. Supreme Court with another freedom to marry case like the Prop 8 case sometime over the next several years. Could be 2 years, could be 5 years, could be longer, but I doubt it.
Seeking the national right to marry, which was sidestepped in the Prop 8 decision.
Precisely. And the question is, two things. We've got to get some good cases in the pipeline so that there are good vehicles for the court to take. Would it tell good stories about the way that same-sex couples are disrespected and harmed by being excluded from marriage? But we also need to do a whole lot of other work outside of the courtroom to make the map of the United States look better, because we're going to have the best chance of winning before the U.S. Supreme Court when the issue gets back to the Supreme Court, no matter whose case gets there, if the map of the country looks better. That is, if we don't have 13 states plus D.C. that allow same-sex couples to marry, but instead we have 20 states or 25 states, instead of 30% of the U.S. population, which is where we are now, that lives in a freedom to marry state. If we have 45% of the U.S. population or 50% or 55% of the U.S. population, I think those factors are going to make a difference to the U.S. Supreme Court. And the other thing that's going to make a difference is, where is public opinion? We're now in the mid-50s. There's a poll showing us that 55% of support nationwide for the freedom to marry. We need to get that number well into the 60s, I think.
And
you sound like Evan Wolfson.
Well, we're working off of a basically common plan. I think Evan is very smart on this stuff, has been for a long time.
And the ACLU has a project right now to get our viewers involved in telling their stories. So talk about that.
Indeed. So in connection with the lawsuit that we are putting together in Virginia, which is we're doing in conjunction with the ACLU Virginia, of course, and with Lambda Legal, we're looking for plaintiffs. We're looking for same-sex couples who either are married in another state but live in Virginia, or people who live in Virginia and want to get married. If there are folks in other states that want to send their stories in, we might well be able to use them for public education, because since we need to move public opinion, we need to get the stories of committed same-sex couples out all across the country.
I think Mary Cheney and her partner live in Virginia.
That would be interesting.
I thought she was... Oh, there's Mary.
Not Liz.
Liz is moving to Wyoming, back to Wyoming. The website is action.aclu.org/couples. and people can go there and tell their stories. So you mainly want them from Virginia now,
Yeah,
but they could be from anywhere.
Could be from anywhere because there's public education work to do everywhere.
And yet, when you see that the fact that Arkansas has started a case, this is what we might call one of these individual cases that some lawyer brought, the legal establishment in the LGBT community not crazy about that case.
Well, you know, look, at the moment I think now there are 9 cases pending in different courts around the country that raise federal claims. Some of them are in state court, as the Arkansas case is. Many of them are in federal court. None of us knows which of these cases is going to be the one that makes it to the U.S. Supreme Court. I think what's important is that we get good, compelling stories to be plaintiffs in the cases, that the cases are well-resourced, and that the arguments are well done. And that could be done by anybody. And we're put together these 3 new cases to add our voices, put our voices, the voices of these plaintiffs, into the mix, and also to bring the issue in front of courts that we think are most likely to give the issue a fair hearing.
You've also asked for summary judgment in Illinois on the case that's been pending there to try to get that moved along and
Indeed.
decided faster. But I think people are curious. They see Lambda Legal is doing stuff, you're doing stuff. Boyce and Olson seem to be in the mood to look for more cases to try to get a national decision. GLAAD in Boston is presumably still working on this. And then you have rump cases in Arkansas and Florida and whatever. Are all of you talking together? And Freedom to Marry, are you working together, or are you just keeping an eye on each other?
Well, the advocacy organizations are all talking to each other. Absolutely. I mean, we within the legal groups, meaning Lambda Legal, the National Center for Lesbian Rights, Gay and Lesbian Advocates and Defenders, and the ACLU, we for decades have had regular meetings where we share information about what we're doing. We try and work on strategy together and try to sort of get on the same page about what makes sense to do. And so we are very coordinated in that work. Obviously, when there are people in private firms in different parts of the country, that's much harder to network with.
Now, you've also talked about bringing Republicans into the fold and a new emphasis on reaching out. And to that end, you announced the hiring of Steve Schmidt, who's a well-known McCain strategist, appears a lot on MSNBC and seems to have a pretty progressive point of view. You've also hired Jimmy LaSalvia, who was running Go Proud, which we have been a little wide-eyed about on this program for a long time.
Well, so here's what we're doing. So look, the way we're going to make the map of the country better is that we've got to pass more marriage laws in any state that we can, and the targets right now are New Jersey, Illinois, and Hawaii. And we need to repeal state constitutional amendments. And we're hoping to go to the ballot with a whole coalition of people in Oregon in 2014. We're hoping to go to the ballot in Nevada in 2016, and we're working to figure out where else it makes sense to go.
Well, there's people in Ohio looking at it too.
Indeed. And so to do that...
And Michigan has cases too.
Yeah, and so there's going to be a lot of places where there's work to do, political work, in the legislatures and in the ballot stuff. Increasingly, as we get past the progressive states, and even in a state like New Jersey, the only way we're making progress on this is if we get Republicans on board. This issue has already become not a left-right issue. It's an issue of fairness because there are a bunch of right-of-center voices that are a part of this. We need to elevate and broaden the right-of-center voices on the issue, and which is why we need prominent Republicans on our side from all parts of the Republican party or the Republican spectrum. So Steve Schmidt, was a senior strategist from McCain. He gets Republicans, and he has credibility, and he can also help us connect with the right people who are going to be relevant in Republican spokespeople in whatever state we're working in. Jimmy LaSalvia opens different doors. I didn't know there was such a thing as the gay Tea Party or gay people in the Tea Party. I'm learning that there are, and look. The ACLU is not going to agree with those people on most everything that we do, but if we agree with them on marriage, we make strange bedfellows compacts all the time, and they're very
Always
effective.
have.
I mean, David Koch and the Koch brothers basically own these legislatures. They're the ones who put a lot of these Republican majorities into the, the what we call them, the blue states. And, I mean, they, unfortunately, although he supports same-sex marriage, or he says he does, he elects a lot of reactionary people to these legislatures.
So, which just means there's
Can't he tell them what to do?
Well, I do not have an in to David Koch, but what you're saying, look, the reality, facing the reality that we are, which is that there are many after the 2010 elections, many conservative state legislatures. Those are the places we need to make progress. Those are the people we need to work with.
And our side needs to learn to vote in off-year elections.
We need to learn to
yes.
vote, and we need to learn to work in these kind of coalitions that are issue-based and not everything else based. And it's a way to make progress on LGBT rights. It's also a way to make progress on other things too.
And speaking of everything else, I just want to say there's a lot of other things you're working on at the ACLU
Absolutely.
LGBT project. I mean, just briefly, some other top thing. Tell us, so it's not just marriage.
That's another top thing. Well, we've been working hard on the Employment Non-Discrimination Act. And there was just, I know you're going to talk about this in a bit.
Senate committee passed it
Senate
today
committee-
as we're taping.
Indeed, and that's a big deal. I mean, getting basic non-discrimination protections for LGBT Americans all across the country is essential, especially as we make progress on marriage, because if we get the freedom to marry nationwide, but we don't have non-discrimination in employment, housing, and public accommodations nationwide, what it means is that you can get married, but you can also get fired for your job once you get married. And
Although it has a problematic religious exemption clause.
It does have a very problematic religious exemption clause. Look, the problem here is that when people open their businesses, an inn, a restaurant, something like that,
Wedding cake maker.
wedding cake makers, photographers. Look, you're in business, and that means you got to open your business to everybody. And it should not be a defense to a discrimination claim to say, well, but I'm doing this because of my religion. You're not operating a religious establishment. You're operating a cake shop.
Will ENDA let them do that?
ENDA does not have an individual exemption in it, which is good, but the language is broader than we would like it to be.
Okay.
And that does seem to be the thrust of the right-wing approach these days, is you are treading on our religious freedom with all this stuff.
Absolutely, and this is something that we all need to pay a lot of attention to and care about as a gay rights issue. And here's why. The plan, I'd like to explain it this way. The plan A of our opponents has, basically to date been stop us from getting the stuff we want, stop us from passing fair marriage laws, stop us from passing non-discrimination laws, ensuring that the parenting laws stay bad. As we start to get more progress on our side, they go from plan A to plan B. And plan B isn't stop us because they realize they can't stop us. But plan B is to carve out a space for themselves using the religious liberty arguments and say, okay, well, they wanted to create a world where our equality doesn't affect the way they live. They experience themselves as the victims of our equality.
Or so they say.
And a bunch of these people believe that. But so these religious freedom arguments, these religious exemption arguments, are so powerful because they could completely eviscerate the non-discrimination norms that we have already passed in states and that we are trying to pass at the federal government level and in other states as well. And so these are not places where it makes sense for us to compromise as a community, because it's going to completely undermine the quality principles that we need.
I've got one other area I want to throw at you
Sure.
quickly. The Obama administration seems to be doing a fantastic job of stepping up to put into place the DOMA decision and work on what's going on in the federal government. But I've seen from our viewers something about, I applied for a VA home loan with my husband and they won't acknowledge us, or the Social Security Administration will only deal with you if you're in the state where you got married and not if you move to a non-marriage state. How do you see all this playing out, or are you involved in this?
No, and we are, and so I'll start off by saying that I agree with you that I think the Obama administration has been really very proactive at making the changes that are needed to dismantle the administrative structure that was created to implement DOMA. And now they're trying to take that out, so to implement the Windsor decision. The clear thing is that if you're a married same-sex couple and you live in a state that respects your marriage, you're going to be treated as married for all federal purposes. That's easy. The harder thing is if, as you just suggested, that if you're married in, let's say, Iowa, but you live in Nebraska, well, Nebraska is going to say that you're unmarried, and some federal programs look to Nebraska law, not to Iowa law, to decide if you're married or not.
Like Social Security.
Like Social Security. Now, some of those rules about looking to Nebraska, not Iowa, the state that you live in, are set by statute. And so the administration may or may not, in broad strokes, will have a hard time changing all of that.
Including Social Security?
Social Security there's a statute. The question is there may be some workarounds that they can engage in. But by far the overwhelming majority of the federal programs don't have a statute that decides it. So they either have no rule that anywhere explicit, or they have a regulation, or they have some kind of sub-regulatory guidance. The administration is in the process of reviewing all of that and changing all the rules that they can to be a place of celebration rule. And since there seems to be no rhyme or reason in the federal programs about which program uses state of celebration and which program uses state of domicile, they both have been used for decades and they both seem fine. It turns out that for our situation, married same-sex couples, place of celebration covers a whole lot more people, and to the administration's credit, it's working to make that happen. So look, I think that people need to complain about things like this, home loan thing for the VA, because that seems like it's wrong. And,
State of Washington, where they're legally married.
Yeah, so that seems like that's just a humongous federal bureaucracy that is going to take some time to catch up, and that's not an excuse. It's just sort of the reality, and make some noise. But I think the administration is going to fix almost all of that.
Great.
James.
Great.
Congratulations.
Great. Thank you both.
Pleasure.
Honor to
Thank
meet
you
you.
so much.
Thanks.
Really,
Great.
very
Okay.
moving. All right, well, we're going to move you on out of here and get to the rest of the news in the time we have, but thanks.
Bye-bye.
Oh, God.
Well,
I don't think I should sit here and cry, so I'll go on
okay.
with the rest of the news.
well, there's stuff to celebrate and there's stuff to cry about, because we did talk about the fact that that ENDA.
Scalia's son, am I going to cry about that?
Oh, well, no, I think you'll laugh.
Okay.
We are going to talk about the fact. Well, should we finish up on anything else to do with marriage?
Let me
George
see.
Bush is now cautious about criticizing gay couples until you've examined your own heart. Maggie Gallagher predicts national same-sex marriage within 2 to 3 years.
But she says that Justice Kennedy declared a fatwa on conservatives with his decision. The log cabin Republicans are asking the Federal Election Commission to clarify their rules about married couples donating to political campaigns because they, in not recognizing same-sex couples, had precluded that, but now they want that made up. And the former basketball star Tim Hardaway, who 6 years ago was saying, "I hate gay people," it was the first person to sign the petition for marriage in Florida and did a whole news conference on it and everything.
And Freedom to Marry, Evan Wolfson's group, did announce this 3-year plan to, get 60% of Americans to support us, Oregon ballot fight.
The Young Republicans are having their national convention in Mobile, Alabama this week, and the Young Conservatives for the Freedom to Marry are holding a reception at that convention in Alabama. And we learned this week that there's been a film crew following the Boyce Olson team on the Prop 8 case for several years, making a documentary for HBO, which will be airing next year.
Right. Okay.
I think that does marriage news for me.
Yeah, and again, the big national news is this week the fact that a Senate committee voted 15-7 to approve the Employment Non-Discrimination Act. We got Lisa Murkowski, Republican of Alaska, who had come out for same-sex marriage, didn't know what she was going to do on this. We got Orrin Hatch on this bill from Utah.
I want to say he supported it before, sort of as an ally of Ted Kennedy. You know, they used to have that
Right.
friendship, but I may be wrong on that. But he's occasionally.
And the history here is that it's the first.
And Mark Kirk, who
Yes.
was the only
He's a
Republican
sponsor.
co-sponsor. He's the closet case from Illinois.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Lamar Alexander says he has 3 amendments. There are a bunch of amendments to this that could be
horrible
coming
amendments.
up. that
Well,
are-
they say they're coming up, but they didn't raise them in committee, and they may or may not raise them on the floor. But they are threatening these awful things about, further broadening the religious exemptions, which are too broad already, and some really
bathroom stuff,
ridiculous,
all this kind of
awful
stuff. It
stuff.
goes on and on and on. People like Rand Paul, people like that.
Awful.
Well, Rand Paul doesn't support civil rights laws.
But in other news, the legislature in California has passed what's called the School Success and Opportunity Act, which is a gender, employment, and non-discrimination. It's a gender bill for students.
Well, students are already protected. This is about implementing it. This is about
Yes.
getting schools to do something
But the governor
to
has
protect
not
them.
signed it yet.
Has not signed it
And
yet.
they're looking for pressure
We're
on
urgent.
him.
That's Jerry Brown, by the way, in case you're wondering.
The state of Illinois will follow through on Freedom to Work's investigation of ExxonMobil and their hiring practices.
Well, Freedom to Work sent in some applications from gays and from straights, and
Matched applications.
In some cases, the more qualified gays were rejected, and the straights were accepted by Exxon.
So the state of Illinois, having received this information, will now conduct a formal investigation.
But
of
Freedom to Work
ExxonMobil.
says they'll drop the complaint if they'll just adopt a non-discrimination policy. I don't think that's enough. It's already been proved that they're discriminating. I mean, once you pass any kind of a policy or law, you got to follow through on it. All right.
Yes.
You know,
All right.
I don't just want a piece of paper. I want justice.
Absolutely. Well, someone getting a little justice is Dynasty Young in Indianapolis. You may remember Dynasty as having moved to Indianapolis, gone to a new school, and then been horrendously bullied and harassed.
So there he
for
is
gender
with his mom, and he struck back, using one of those devices.
Well, they went to the school multiple times to complain about the harassment and bullying, and the school did nothing. So finally his mother sent him to school with a little flashlight device that included a sort of taser-like component. And when he's surrounded by a crowd of kids
6
who are about to beat the you-know-what out of him, he held up this thing and pushed the button, and he got expelled from school.
Well, he was suspended, and that will be removed from his record. He gets $65,000 in compensation, and I just read that Indiana has enacted an anti-bullying legislation, despite being a not very progressive state.
Yes, they're trying to do a lot of other bad stuff.
You want to hear about some of the bad guys?
Sure.
Well, of course, Pat Robertson this week called for a vomit button on Facebook for when pics of gay people kissing come up, as opposed to a like button. And then there is...
I was in a meeting last night about the ACT UP reunion, and our friend George Plagianos, who's a great longtime activist, said, a right to marry, how about a right to gay dating? Let's legalize that. Thought that was a
Well,
riot.
there's really no such thing, according to Father Paul Scalia, the son of Antonin Scalia. He works for the Catholic group Courage that says that they can change homosexuality or stop it. He says there is no such thing as a homosexual person because it collapses personhood into sexual inclinations, and it should not be considered an orientation.
What should it be considered? I consider it a gift.
Just an inclination. All right. On a positive side, the National Endowment for the Arts announced presented the National Medal of Arts winners this week. Tony Kushner, out gay, got one, as did Ellsworth Kelly, the artist. And on the National Humanities Medal, out lesbian Kay Ryan, who's already the poet laureate, got one.
Former.
Okay, and is she a lesbian?
No.
No, okay.
I don't know.
All right, we're not going to read that name then. I tried to do a little Googling on it.
We're happy to spread rumors if we have any basis for knowledge, but when we don't, we try to restrain ourselves.
Oh, and then on the bad side, there's sci-fi author Orson Scott Card, who was a NOM board member. He wrote this thing called Ender's Game, which is being made into a big movie that's coming out this fall, and much you know.
He's always been homophobic.
So
people
now,
have argued this with him.
So now he's trying to say, oh, well, you know, the court settled it. It's moot. Leave me alone.
Don't boycott my movie.
Yeah, and so Geeks Out is calling for a boycott of the movie, and you go to skipendersgame.com and you can read all about it.
Yeah, because really he hasn't changed his mind. He's just trying to
he's,
get away from a boycott.
Terrible things.
Yeah. A bunch of national right-wing leaders met June 29th in Louisville, Kentucky, to plan a new Christian boys group to offer an alternative to the now homo-friendly Boy Scouts.
Semi-homo-friendly.
Yeah, not so friendly.
Just to scouts, not scoutmasters.
And their credo will be, you can be of any faith, but this will have Christian values, so we're happy to accept you if you're of any faith, but you have to adhere to Christian values and promise sexual purity.
Well, I don't know if Ana Luisa Valencia will be doing that. She is trying out for Miss South Carolina, which is part of the Miss America pageant. She may be the first out lesbian in the Miss America competition.
She's 20 years old. She's been competing in pageants for a long time, and we wish her luck.
Yes.
We mourn the death of Jim Busson, 63 years old, from cancer, an activist for the last 40 years. He was the president of Dignity USA. You may have known him in that role.
No, I was long gone from Dignity.
85 to 89.
Those days.
In the Chicago Gay and Lesbian Hall of Fame. Lots of activism in the Midwest against Anita Bryant. Pope John Paul II named him as one of 9 Americans he refused to meet with when he came to the U.S. in '87. That's an enemies list I'd like to have been on.
All right. Now, we told you, you know, a lot of people saw online this video of, on Gay Pride Day, people on the F train in New York getting harassed and assaulted by these 2 men. Well, somebody, because everybody saw this video, said, I think I saw them, and had a confrontation with them and was grabbed by these guys who said, well, we weren't those guys, but we're going to beat the hell out of you. Effing F, you know, et cetera. So, but my advice is if you spot these guys, call the police. Don't try to take it on yourself.
If you see something, say something, but not to them.
Yes.
Please.
God.
The New York State Department of Labor is giving a measly $1 million to 3 LGBT organizations for homeless LGBT youth with a prior involvement in the criminal justice system to get education, job training, job placement. We'd like a lot more money for that, please.
It's a start.
And this OutServe Service Members Legal Defense Network controversy is somewhat progressed.
They're going to get a new board. The co-chair who caused all the trouble is leaving.
Yeah, a committee of board members and chapter leaders will reorganize this. They say this really is about money problems, not about bias against transgender or transsexual members.
Well, a lot of this is what groups, I think, go through when they win their big victory.
Yeah.
You know, as they did in
Well,
Don't Ask, Don't
and this
Tell.
is a very clear-cut one.
Yeah.
But the ACLU is keeping on.
Well, there will always be civil liberties issues and civil
all right.
rights issues to deal
international news?
Yes. So what happened in Costa Rica? They may have voted to allow same-sex civil unions by mistake. Liberals inserted language to open the door to civil unions, and it passed.
Civil unions without discrimination is what they passed.
So, the Conservatives want President Laura Chinchilla to veto it, but
she signed it.
Oh, she did sign it?
Yes.
I read an earlier report.
Now they want to try to repeal it.
Okay.
No, I don't think so. Well, we'll see what happens. The Archbishop of Canterbury has announced that Church of England schools will fight anti-gay bullying, even though they're not changing any of their policies on same-sex marriage.
Right. And the General Synod of the Church of England did vote again to ordain women bishops. The only reason and it's going to take 2 more years before they can get everybody together and make this happen. But the bishops clearly are on the side of having other women bishops.
We've been telling you horrible stories from Russia for weeks, months, years. Well, we got a little support from an ally. Tilda Swinton was in Moscow, and she got herself pictured holding a big rainbow flag and tweeted out the message, "In solidarity from Russia with love."
Did she get arrested for corrupting children, which is what the law says?
She should have been, and fined heavily, but not that I know of.
They're having an election in Zimbabwe, so President Robert Mugabe, he keeps topping himself. This week he said gays and lesbians who don't, he's going to throw them into a room, and if they don't conceive children, they should be jailed. Amnesty just issued a report.
Because they claim they can conceive children, and if they're not willing to prove it, then that's it for them.
And Amnesty just issued a report on how 38 African countries still criminalize consensual same-sex activity, as 13 states did in the United States until 2003. But the elections in Zimbabwe are on July 31st.
Isn't it fascinating to be alive in the midst of this great movement?
And then, you know, the two popes issued a joint encyclical for the first time. And
yeah, I love the way they said it's
two
never
popes.
happened before. Well, of course, because two haven't been alive in 600 years.
They restated their opposition to same-sex marriage while calling for more dialogue with scientists. Not necessarily about this, because if you talk to scientists about this, they'd get you off your anti-gay kick.
Call up Galileo. In Chile, a gay man, 19 years old,
Esteban Navarro,
brutally attacked by 6 people, lost his leg as a result
well,
of this attack.
they were hitting him with machetes, knives, iron bars. They had to amputate his foot and now his leg. This was in Peñalolén, Chile.
And there was another attack on a transsexual guy who lost his eye in another attack. This, even though, you know, a couple of years ago there was a gay guy murdered and they passed a law that everybody got very enthusiastic about it, but that doesn't wipe out this kind of stuff.
No.
In Bangladesh, transgender and transsexual citizens are demonstrating for an ability to have a national identity card that identifies them as a third sex, which is the popular way to do it there, because they needed the card for voting. And no one will give them a card either way for either their born sex or their assumed current identity. And these cards have been promised but not delivered. It may disenfranchise 100,000 people in Bangladesh from voting. All right, AIDS news.
Yes.
Our associate producer, Bill Ballman, is just back from the International AIDS
Welcome back, Bill,
Conference
in Malaysia.
Kuala Lumpur, which he said was fascinating, where they talked about the Boston cases of the couple of people who may have had HIV eradicated. Maybe too early to tell. WHO guidelines.
Early stages.
You know, test and treat. We'll give you more details as we go along. But the news here is that in South Carolina, they have decided to be the last state to end the segregation of HIV-positive prisoners. It's nice to know that that's not going to happen anywhere anymore, although I suspect that there's a little de facto segregation everywhere.
And now that we've announced it on this show, some states will get some ideas.
Well, that kind of segregation keeps people out of drug treatment programs, job training, jobs in the prison, education. So you really do need to get rid of that segregation. And there's a case developing in New York, which I think is actually indicative of a lot of things, which is why I'm going to mention it, where a guy went to a hospital to get post-exposure prophylaxis medicines after he had had an unsafe sex encounter. I don't know if the condom broke or they didn't use protection or whatever. And the hospital said, oh, there's no such thing. No such thing. And sent him away. And then he went back. And someone else said to him, again, there's no such thing. And it took calling a doctor who someone happened to know, who worked at the hospital, who called the emergency room and screamed at them to get this guy treatment. We have to make people aware of post-exposure prophylaxis and make sure that hospitals and clinics and pharmacies and doctors and everybody know about this and provide it.
I think that practitioners should also be told that there's a vaccine for polio, too.
and aspirin. All right, entertainment news.
Well, with high hopes, I went to see this play called Choir Boy by Terrell Alvin McCraney at the Manhattan Theater Club. He's the one who did the brother-sister plays. Remember those a couple of years ago at the, at the Public Theater? High hopes. It's about African-American young men in a choir at a prep school.
Homoerotic
with a
overtone?
a central gay character,
Oh,
a
okay.
quite, I'll say it, flamboyant, the guy in the white T-shirt there, gay character. And there's good acting and especially singing, but the script lacks realness, I think.
Okay.
And I was very disappointed, although the Times is raving about it, so you won't be able to get a seat.
Congratulations to Josh Kilmer Purcell, a former columnist for Out Magazine, and Brent Ridge. You know them as the fabulous Beekman Boys,
Yeah.
and as the winners of The Amazing Race.
Yep.
They got married.
They did.
That's sweet.
And while GLAAD has forgiven Alec Baldwin, conservatives, including your friend Jimmy LaSalvia, they're hopping on this because Baldwin is considered a liberal, and they're saying, why? Look, he's got a right to say what he said, but don't be so quick to forgive what is a real transgression here that you would hang a right winger for.
Like Orson Scott Card.
Correct.
Yes.
So I agree with them in this case.
Okay. Lady Gaga, we talked about Cher performing at the big Pride concert here in New York.
Yeah.
Well, the night before, they held a rally and Lady Gaga showed up.
Well.
She hasn't been in public much lately, and she sang a slightly altered version of the Star-Spangled Banner, waving the rainbow flag and talking about the gay flag flying. It was very sweet. Before we get to Steve Grand, which we'll end this with, Elizabeth Hasselbeck leaving The View, going to Fox News.
No great loss as far as I'm concerned. I couldn't stand her.
I
know she got more pro-gay over the years.
she was very pro-gay,
Yeah.
and I suspect, my theory is she would go to Fox News and discover that she's really a liberal. We'll see, or else, Stockholm Syndrome
Then
will
she
set
won't
in.
last very long there.
Yeah. But one of the big entertainment stories this week is this new out gay singer. Did a country song, although I think he wants ultimately to be more of a pop singer. Doesn't have a label or anything yet.
Steve Grand.
Yeah. He did this song called All American Boy that is a very out song, and it's the story of him having a crush on a guy and actually kissing him when they're in the pond together.
Right.
And the guy rejects him and says, no, that's not me. But the thing I love about it is that the guy doesn't totally reject him as a human being. He remains his friend and supports him. And
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah.
Instead of getting a sock on the jaw.
So we will end today's program by rolling that, and it'll go as long as it goes, and we'll see you next week. And thank you again to James Essex,
Bye-bye.
and the ACLU, and everybody,
Thank you.
and see you later.
Thanks for watching.
Teens only drinks whiskey. Found him by the fire while his girl was getting frisky. Oh, they say we go this road tonight. And he smiles, his arms around her, but his eyes are holding me, just a captive to his wonder. Oh, they say we go this road tonight. And now I know that that's a girl, I mean no disrespect. The way that shirt hugs your chest, boy, I just won't forget. I'll be sitting here, drinking my whiskey. I won't say goodnight unless I think you might have missed me. Oh, be my all-American boy tonight. Every day's the 4th of July. It's alright, alright. And we can keep this up till the morning light. And you can hold me deep in your eyes. It's alright, alright. So be my all-American boy. Ripped jeans, a tight shirt. He lights a cigarette, you know I'm glad that she can't stand it all. Drink the moonlight from his eyes. just a moment. I wanna take this and now we don't need no photo of it, no. We should go this road tonight.